Someone in your life is running a pattern that psychologists first mapped in the 1980s, and it has been quietly reshaping the way your brain processes love ever since. You haven't called it manipulation yet, because half the time it feels like the best feeling in the world. By the end, you'll understand exactly which microsignal tells you the loop is resetting in real time. Let's set the scene. You're in a relationship, romantic, close friendship, maybe family. The other person is warm, attentive, they make you feel chosen. And then, without warning or explanation, something shifts. The warmth doesn't leave dramatically, it just quietly withdraws, like a light being dimmed from another room. You notice first in the texting. Responses that used to come in minutes now take hours. The tone is shorter, polite but distant. You check the message again, you reread your last few. You start mentally auditing yourself. What did you say? What did you do? Because something must explain this sudden coolness. This is where most people think the story starts. It doesn't. The story started weeks or months earlier, during the warmth. That's when the neurological groundwork was laid. That's when your brain was taught, through repetition and reward, that this particular person is the source of something it now considers essential. Helen Fisher at Rutgers ran fMRI scans on people who described themselves as deeply in love. What she found wasn't poetry. It was dopamine. The same reward circuitry that lights up in cocaine users lit up when her subjects looked at photos of their partners. Love, neurologically, is a substance your brain learns to crave. Now here's where it gets specific. It isn't just love that creates this wiring. It's inconsistent love. Psychologists call it intermittent reinforcement, a reward schedule where the payoff is unpredictable. And unpredictable rewards don't just motivate behavior. They create the most powerful, most resistant to extinction behavior patterns known in behavioral science. Think about a slot machine. You don't keep pulling the lever because you always win. You keep pulling it because you sometimes win, unpredictably, just often enough to keep you hoping. Your nervous system learns, the next pull might be the one. The anticipation itself becomes the addiction. The person in your life has become your lever. Stay with this because what comes next is the part that was documented, named, and studied, and almost nobody told you. The pattern has a specific shape, a specific rhythm, and once you see the shape, you will start recognizing it everywhere. Keep watching. The cold phase begins, not a fight, not cruelty, just distance. A subtle withdrawal of the attention you've learned to need. Your cortisol, your stress hormone, starts climbing. Research on anxiously attached individuals shows their cortisol levels spike not during conflict, but during uncertainty. Ambiguity is the trigger, not anger. Ambiguity. You find yourself filling the silence, sending a follow-up message, suggesting plans, laughing a little harder at something that wasn't that funny, reaching for the warmth that used to come so naturally. And here's the cruel neuroscience. The effort you're now expending is deepening the attachment. The more you reach, the more wired in they become. Your body is doing something specific right now, in the cold phase that you probably haven't named. You're hypervigilant. You're scanning every interaction for clues. A one-word reply gets analyzed for tone. A liked post on social media feels significant. Your nervous system has moved into a state that researchers call anxious monitoring. You're on alert. Constantly. And while you're in that state, something important is happening to your baseline. What counts as normal is quietly shifting. The anxiety of the cold phase starts to feel like the default. Your nervous system recalibrates around uncertainty. By the time the warmth returns, and it will return, normal will mean something different than it did 6 months ago. Here's something that will hit differently once you've sat with it. The person running this pattern doesn't always know they're running it. Some do, some don't. The manipulation can be entirely unconscious, a learned survival behavior, a pattern absorbed in childhood, a reflexive self-protection mechanism. That doesn't make it less harmful to your neurology, but it changes the story. Dutton and Aaron, and later Dutton and Painter in 1993, studied something they called traumatic bonding. They found that intermittent abuse and affection in close relationships created stronger attachment than consistent care. Not weaker, stronger. Your brain interprets the contrast, cold then warm, as profound significance. The relief feels like love. It isn't always. You're in the cold phase, maybe days now, maybe a week. And then there it is, a message, a call. They sound like themselves again. That particular warmth in their voice, the one that feels like exhaling after holding your breath. Your dopamine doesn't just return, it surges. Because deprivation followed by reward creates a bigger neurochemical hit than reward alone ever could. Here's what's coming in the next section: the exact mechanics of what happens inside you during the warm return, and the one behavioral signal that marks the precise moment the loop resets. This is the part most people never get to see clearly. Stay with it. The warm return doesn't announce itself as a manipulation. It arrives as relief. They're warm again, funny again. They reference an inside joke. They make a plan with you. And your nervous system, which has been flooded with cortisol for days, begins to drain. The tension releases. You feel yourself smiling before you've consciously decided to. Notice what you don't do in this moment. You don't ask what happened. You don't name the distance. You don't say, "I noticed you pulled away and it affected me." Because to name it feels like risking the warmth again, so you absorb it quietly. You feel grateful. And in that gratitude, you unconsciously agree to the terms of the loop without ever having read the contract. Your brain is now doing something that Fisher's fMRI data captures with uncomfortable clarity. The reward centers are flooded. The threat detection systems are quieting. And crucially, the memory of the discomfort is being overwritten, not erased, but contextually reframed. See, it worked out. The reaching was worth it. The waiting was worth it. This is what love feels like. This is the recalibration moment. This is where the loop does its deepest work, because now your nervous system has a new data point. Discomfort leads to this. Anxiety leads to relief. The cold phase is no longer just unpleasant. It is now, neurologically, the beginning of the reward sequence. Your body has learned to find the coldness meaningful. Let's talk about you, specifically you, right now, reading this in your own life. Think about the last time you felt relieved by someone's return. Not happy, relieved. There's a difference. Happiness is additive. Relief is the removal of pain. If what you feel when someone shows up is primarily relief, your nervous system has been trained on absence. That's the tell. The person running this pattern is often perceived as the stable one. Calm, grounded, they don't appear destabilized. You do. And because emotional dysregulation is visible and stability is invisible, you begin to absorb the story that the problem is your sensitivity, your neediness, your insecurity. The loop generates its own cover story, and it fits perfectly. 6 months in, your threshold has moved. Behavior that would have felt cold at the start now registers as neutral. Behavior that would have felt neutral now registers as warm. You've adapted, not grown, adapted to a narrower emotional range. Researchers who study long-term exposure to unpredictable relational stress describe this as a contraction of the window of tolerance. You're operating smaller. Keep going, because this next section contains something most psychology content never shows you: the specific moment when you can interrupt the loop, using the very signal the loop relies on to reset itself. It's subtle. You've probably already seen it without knowing what you were looking at. The warm return always has a signature move. It's different for every person running the pattern, but it follows the same function. It offers just enough intimacy to close the distance without fully addressing it. A specific phrase, a particular gesture, a call out of nowhere where they're completely, warmly, attentively themselves. It's not fake. It's real warmth. That's what makes it so disorienting. The signature move is designed, consciously or not, to be precisely calibrated to you. They have learned, through months of interaction, exactly what makes you feel seen. The right topic, the right tone, the right amount of vulnerability from them. And when they deploy it after a cold phase, it doesn't just restore connection. It deepens it, because contrast deepens everything. You feel it in your chest first. A kind of opening, like a fist unclenching. Your breathing changes, your posture changes. You lean in literally and figuratively. And for a few days, sometimes a few weeks, the loop is in its hot phase. Everything is warm. Plans are made. Laughter is easy. Your nervous system is saturated with the relief it was starved of. And this, exactly this, is what the cold phase was building toward. Here's what Dutton and Painter found that nobody puts on motivational posters. Separation from an intermittently reinforcing partner increases attachment, not decreases, increases. The cold phase doesn't push you away. it pulls you closer. Every day of distance makes the gravitational pull of the warm return stronger. By the time they come back, you are more attached than before they left. So now you're in the hot phase, and here is where something quiet and devastating happens. You stop processing the cold phase accurately. In the warmth, the distance feels like a misunderstanding, a rough patch, something you both got through. The discomfort is reframed not as a pattern but as a story with a resolution. And stories with resolutions feel complete. Finished, not cyclical. But cycles don't feel like cycles from inside them. They feel like episodes. Each cold phase feels like a new event. Each warm return feels like a recovery. You're not experiencing a loop, you're experiencing a series of individually meaningful moments. The looping is invisible to you because you're living it linearly. This is why recognition is so hard, and why naming it changes everything. Think about when the cold phase typically begins, after intimacy, after vulnerability, after you've shared something real and been received warmly. The pattern often follows closeness with distance, not always, but often enough that your nervous system starts to associate being truly seen with the anticipation of loss. Opening up starts to carry a quiet dread. You begin to self-protect inside the relationship. Here's what I need you to understand before the final section, because this is where it gets precise. The loop has a reset point, a specific, observable, behavioral moment. It isn't the beginning of the warmth. It's one particular signal that comes just before the warmth fully restores, and once you know what to look for, you cannot unsee it. The reset signal is this, a bid for your normalcy. Before the full warmth returns, there is almost always a moment where they reach for your ordinary self, not your hurt self, not your guarded self, but the version of you that exists before the loop ran. A casual question, a reference to something you love. Have you watched that show yet? Mundane, deliberate, normalizing. It's a behavioral signal that says, we're back now, without ever saying we left. It skips the acknowledgement. It bridges directly to the version of your relationship that existed before the distance, as if the distance were merely a gap in conversation rather than a structured withdrawal. The warmth comes through that bridge, and your nervous system, starved and waiting, crosses it without thinking. You probably have a specific memory surfacing right now, a particular moment that fits this shape. The casual text after days of silence. The warm voice on a call that pretends the previous week didn't exist. The way everything felt normal again so quickly that questioning it seemed like the strange choice. Your nervous system recognized the bridge before your mind did. Here is the neurological truth underneath that memory. Your brain was not weak. It was responding exactly as a human brain responds to intermittent reward following deprivation. The system worked precisely as designed by evolution. Reward salience increases with scarcity. You were not naive. You were neurotypically human in an environment optimized to exploit that humanity. Let's name the full loop cleanly so your mind can hold it as a shape. Phase 1, warmth, connection, attunement, intimacy that feels genuine. Phase 2, withdrawal, distance, ambiguity, cortisol elevation, hypervigilance. Phase 3, the bid for normalcy, the reset signal, the casual bridge. Phase 4, full warm return, dopamine flood, relief experienced as love, recalibration of baseline. Repeat. The repetition is what does the neurological damage. One cycle might be a rough patch. 12 cycles is a training program. Your nervous system has now run this sequence enough times that it has internalized the rhythm. You may find yourself feeling vaguely uneasy during extended warmth, waiting for the other shoe. That waiting is the loop running even in the hot phase. It never fully stops. This is the part that Dutton and Painter's research made unflinching. The pattern creates post-separation attachment that defies logic. People who leave these relationships or are left report more intense longing, not less, than people leaving consistently warm relationships. The brain, trained on intermittent reward, interprets absence as the cold phase. It waits for the warm return that no longer comes. It keeps pulling the lever. This is the last piece, and it's the one that actually gives you something to do with everything you now know. The reset signal, the bid for your normalcy, is the most important moment in the loop. It's the hinge. And unlike the cold phase or the full warm flood, it is small enough and calm enough that you can see it clearly, in real time, before your neurochemistry catches up. When you feel that casual bid, "Hey, have you seen that thing?" and you feel the warmth beginning to return, there is a 3-second window. A gap between stimulus and response that your prefrontal cortex can occupy before your limbic system floods it. In that gap, you can ask one question: did the distance get named? If it didn't, the loop just reset. Naming it doesn't mean confrontation. It can be internal. A quiet recognition: this is the bridge. This is the reset signal. The warmth is real and the pattern is also real, and both things are true simultaneously. You don't have to blow up the relationship to hold this knowledge, but you do have to stop pretending the cold phase was weather. It was behavior. Patterned, repeated behavior. The longer you hold the pattern as a shape rather than a series of episodes, the harder it is for your nervous system to run the full recalibration sequence. Recognition interrupts automaticity. Your brain cannot run the same unconscious reward learning loop while your conscious mind is watching it run. Observation changes the observed. This is true in physics. It's true in attachment neuroscience. There are people who will watch this and feel relief, not because things are better, but because the thing finally has a name. There are people who will watch this and feel grief, because naming a pattern means you can no longer pretend it isn't one. Both responses are correct. Both responses mean the same thing. You just saw something clearly that your nervous system had been running in the dark. Someone in your life has been running a pattern that psychologists first mapped in the 1980s, and now you know its shape, its rhythm, its neuroscience, and its reset point. The warm return microsignal is the bid for your normalcy. Casual, bridging, wordlessly pretending the distance never happened. When you feel that opening in your chest and nothing has been named, that is the exact moment the loop resets. Now you can see it. Tell me in the comments, what does your reset signal sound like?